Welcome to another Open-E webinar. My name is Greg. I'm a support engineer here in the United States. And what we're going to talk about today is upgrading iSCSI failover working in version 6 to the new version 7 and configuring version 7 for active passive failover also. And as you can see on your screen, a few things here we're going to discuss and a few things here we're going to do. Initially, prior to doing this upgrade, you're going to want to schedule a maintenance window because we need to disconnect initiators to the virtual IPs, because as we make the upgrade, the virtual IP is going to come down because we're going to have to stop the failover service. We'll need to make sure that both version 6 nodes are on the latest build of version 6 before going to version 7. We are going to stop and disable replication and the failover service itself. We're going to upgrade to the latest version, version 7, reconfigure the volumes for replication in the proper direction, source to destination, just as in version 6. We're going to bind the two nodes together for replication, and finally configure the active passive failover service in version 7. And guys, if you've got any questions, go ahead and type them out in the chat window. If you have them, I will answer them as I can get to them. I can see someone here says the sound has gone off. Has it come back? Do I need to turn the microphone up? If everybody wants to kind of give me a sound check response there, would be fantastic. Okay, it might be going in and out because we've got participants joining as this is starting right now, so that's entirely possible. Probably bandwidth, you're right. And as I've mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, and it'll be available on our website and the webinars, just like all the rest of them are. So let's go ahead and get started here. Like I said, if you've got questions, just type them out in the chat window, and we'll get to them as we can. We'll have a little bit of a break in the middle of this because we'll have to wait on the two nodes to reboot, so we can address some questions at that point, if anybody has any. All right. So as you can see on the screen here, I've got version 6 interface, and I've got DSS1, and I've got DSS2. DSS1 is the active node, it's the primary node in failover configuration. And we'll go ahead and log into both of them here. We can see that they're already configured. You can see failover is running. Ping nodes are available. This is the active node, like I said. Replication is running. So typically this is a normal scenario here prior to doing the upgrade. Initially what you're going to need to do is we need to stop the failover service, and stopping the failover service in version 6 from the primary node will stop the service on both nodes. If you have had a prior failover event where the secondary is the current active node, you need to sync the volumes back and fail back to the primary node before you start this process. It will make things a lot easier. Scroll down here a little bit, let's see, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the failover service. And you can see it when it automatically stopped it on the secondary node. Everything's inactive. Same on the primary node. And at this point, I also need to stop the replication task, or tasks if you have more than one. I'm going to stop that task. Now, prior to doing this, or even at this point in the process, if you wanted to, you need to make sure that you're on the latest version of version 6, build 6.335. And there's a few reasons for that. One is it is the most up-to-date release, but more importantly, prior to starting this process, you'll have upgraded your version 6 product keys to version 7. And the version 7 product key will work in the latest version of version 6 should you decide at some point after this process to go back to version 6. Can't think of any reason off the top of my head why, but it's entirely possible. So this gives you the ability to go back and forth between the builds if you needed to for any particular reason. When you initially upgrade to version 7, it will ask you for a key. So you'll need to have that key prior to doing this process. All right, replication has stopped. I don't need to delete it here. We'll have to recreate it again in version 7, so I can just leave it, but not a problem. Now at this point, I want to go to the secondary node, and we need to upgrade both nodes to version 7. I've already uploaded the ISOs here to do the upgrade, so we simply need to select version 7 as the default on the next system reboot. OK that. Do the same on the primary node. And reboot both nodes. All right, while we're waiting on those to reboot, a couple of important points here is in version 7, the only option is now 64-bit operating system. So if you are running 32-bit in version 6, you'll either need to stay on version 6 or you'll need to offload all your data so you can recreate your volume group in version 7 64-bit and restore your data. So far, this will take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes here to reboot. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat window and we'll see what we can do for you. All right, this entire process doesn't take very long. Of course, it depends on how many replication tasks you have. The IQNs on the iSCSI targets will come up in version 7, so that does not need to be reconfigured. The iSCSI IDs on each LUN will come up on version 7, so that does not need to be reconfigured. As you'll see here shortly, the version 7 web interface is slightly different, and it's actually easier to use. We'll be able to configure active-passive failover from only the primary node. No longer do we need to bounce back and forth in creating replication, IP assignments, and that sort of thing. If you need to add more iSCSI logical volumes or more targets, that process is still done between both web interfaces. If you have that in your schedule to do, then this would be a good opportunity to do it while failover is off. In version 7, you cannot actively add tasks or volumes to failover right now. You will be able to do that here in another version 7 release very soon. There's no way to install the VMware virtual, the virtual tools into DSS. These two machines I'm running right here actually are virtual machines. We have been working on that, and I think that at some point in the future we'll be able to do that. But as of right now, you can't. All right, web interfaces are coming back up now, so we can log into DSS V7 web GUI. Now, after the reboots here, like I mentioned earlier, it will ask you for a product key. I've entered one already, so I don't have to do that today. You'll have to enter a product key and reboot one more time for the key to be applied. So just to skip another reboot, I went ahead and did that ahead of time. First thing you want to do here, though, is we need to verify that our volume replication flags are set appropriately for the volumes that are in replication, source versus destination. My DSS1 here, what was the primary node in version 6, I want it to also be the primary node in version 7. So I need to change its volume to source and apply that. I'm going to check the same setting in my node 2, DSS2. And this one is marked as destination appropriately already, so we don't need to do anything there. Now what we need to also do is assign the host binding address. In version 6, you had to assign the replication IP at each node. In version 7, you don't have to do that. They communicate to each other a little bit more efficiently. So what we need to do is just give it the replication link here. And in most scenarios, there's a dedicated path for replication. We recommend that you do that to keep it separate from iSCSI traffic or management traffic, depending upon how many NICs you're using. One path for each process is probably better to keep traffic separated. The way that this works now in version 7 is if I give it an IP here, which is, of course, I have to do, it knows to look at the subnet. And in order to tell version 7 to take a particular path in replication, the destination on the second node needs an IP in the same subnet, and automatically it will figure out that path. And version 7 also requires the administrative login to connect to the other machine for the replication connection. We give it the right IP. All right, now you can see it found the other system, and it matches, tells us it's reachable, and on the second node, it will give us the source IP automatically. You can see here the 0.1. Now back on the primary unit, the next step here is to recreate your replication tasks. I have only one volume, so I only have to recreate one task. And this interface is the same as in version 6 with the throttle, pick your logical volumes, etc. Create the task. All right, I'm going to go ahead and actually, while I'm on this page, I'll go ahead and just start the task. All right, the task is started. Now, the next step here is, if you had more tasks, go ahead and recreate those, on down your task list. And then the next step here is let's go back over to the failover. And a good question here, will it re-replicate the whole data store? No, it won't. The information on tasks need to be recreated. However, the underlying metadata on each volume is kept between version 6 and 7. So it will only replicate the delta, which there shouldn't be any at this case because we disconnected all the initiators and stopped failover. So there should be no live connections to the iSCSI LUNs. Now, back in setting up failover, this is a fairly straightforward process. You can just go right down the list here in the blocks. You can see the top block is informational, just as if it were in version 6, information about ping nodes, connections, host names, remote IP, etc. Initially, we need to tell the system what our initial paths, our auxiliary paths are. By default, it picks up the replication as a path. So if we add another path here, we're going to use ETH1. And this is a little easier in version 7 where you can just pick your interfaces. It already knows the IPs that are assigned, match them from node to node, and just simply add another path. As I do this, it's also talking to the second node and giving the same information to the second node. So if we were to look at the failover configuration on the secondary node, we'll see this information being added on this side as well. You see I have 2 auxiliary paths. At the moment they're inactive because the failover service is not running. Okay, back on the primary node, the next step is adding the ping nodes. As usual, we recommend more than 1. And this information, of course, is also pushed to the secondary node. I'm going to add a second ping node. Okay. Failover trigger policy, just as in version 6, on I/O errors, on only volumes configured in failover, etc. The default setting is most appropriate. Now here we're going to create what's new in version 7 is the resource pool. And this refers to the group of volumes and targets that are involved in failover. You can create 2 resource pools if you need to create more than 1. The limit right now is 2. So if I select iSCSI resources, this is going to show me, let's see, I need to add my target. These are which targets are involved in failover. Obviously, if you have more than 1 target, add all of them, half of them, whichever you need in failover. The next step here is I'm going to add a virtual IP. And if you're using multipath from your initiators, you can add as many virtual IPs here as you need, of course, depending upon the availability of interfaces. Now this information is also being pushed to the secondary node. Okay. At this point, let me check my replication here. All right. And the final step here is to restart failover, which brings the virtual IPs back up, reconnect the initiators, and you're good. That would be active passive failover. Are there any questions? You guys feel free to go ahead and type them out here in the chat window, and we'll address them if we need to. My replication task, something is wrong with it. If there aren't any questions, I want to thank everybody for attending today. And like I mentioned earlier, this will be available on our website. So look for it in the webinar section here in a few days. Cluster is finally starting now, and like I said, this will bring up the virtual IPs, and then you're back to connections again. All right, as you can see, statuses are updated, services running, replication volumes are synchronized, ping nodes are available from each node. That's another thing here in version 6 is you can see the status of both nodes from only the primary. The secondary, of course, will show us the same information.